Good afternoon, everybody. We're now in the latter parts of the conference, getting close to the end. I'm very excited to be the moderator for and present this session, which is where we've got the speaker, Dr. Michelle Mulder, the Executive Director of Grants, Innovation and Product Development with the South African Medical Research Council. The conference is about growing medtech post-pandemic. I, Simone Rudolph-Short, is the chairperson of MDMSA. We look forward to the session, and we request that our delegates make use of the chat or the Q&A facilities to ask questions of the speaker. Michelle Mulder heads up the Medical Device and Diagnostic Innovation Cluster. This cluster is a national initiative aimed at exploiting a high concentration of skills, expertise, infrastructure, and companies within the South African medtech sector. The initiative is aimed at stimulating and intensifying technology, innovation within the sector, as well as encouraging an integrated ecosystem in support of increasing the competitiveness of the industry. Please join the session to understand the localization plans that support a self-sufficient medtech sector. Michelle, as I said, is the manager of SAMRC. She also has a doctorate in medical microbiology from the University of Cape Town. She has a postdoctorate experience in a startup biotechnology company from the University of Cambridge. She has spent 10 years consulting on technology innovation through her own company, has been involved for the last 17 years in strategic management and commercialization of SAMRC's intellectual property and in capacity building these areas in Southern and Eastern Africa. So we welcome Dr. Mulder and we look forward to your presentation.
Thank you very much, Simone, and good morning to everybody. Thank you very much to the organizers, to SAMRC, for inviting me to present. Today, I'm just going to get my presentation up. I'm very excited to share with you what we're doing in MeDDIC. This is probably a little bit of a deviation from what you've been hearing this morning. I'm moving a little bit more upstream to the innovation side. Please just indicate when you can see my slides.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about building the medical technology sector in South Africa. My slides seem to keep coming and going. I don't know if it's just for me. So I'm going to talk a little bit more, start off really setting the scene for about health innovation in South Africa, and I think, how I think we're faring. Then I'll talk about the history and origins of MeDDIC and how we got to where we are, how this fits into the MRC, and then I'll spend the rest of the presentation talking about what MeDDIC is all about, what we plan to do, and how we fit in with all the other stakeholders. So this is really a very busy slide, but I think some of the key ingredients we need for successful health innovation in South Africa. And when I talk about health innovation, I'm talking really right from the start, from idea all the way down to a final commercialized product. So we need obviously the strong fundamental research base, which is really the idea and knowledge generation. The new technologies are coming out of here, the new ideas for new products, etc. And this needs to be underpinned by a very strong research and development infrastructure. We need very sophisticated high-tech equipment to be able to do cutting-edge research. We also need sophisticated cutting-edge manufacturing infrastructure. Together with this, we need this full product development and commercialization value chain in place. So we need to know that we can take a product right from development through testing, registration, commercialization, and scale up. And we need a seamless process where all the building blocks are in place and that products can move through nice and smoothly. And then, of course, we need this competitive industry sector that can absorb these technologies and turn them into commercial opportunities. All of these are underpinned by some key support mechanisms that have to be present. Supportive policy environment, enough funding, the skilled human resources, and of course this market commitment. So in terms of supportive policy, we need to make sure that our policy environment supports and nurtures and encourages an innovation culture. We need to have a strong IP regime in place, a strong regulatory regime, and particularly policy for local, supporting local technologies and local products. And then of course we need to fund the whole value chain from the beginning to the end. We need to have the skills to do that, all the way from the researchers down to those who can commercialize and scale. And then we need a health system that's well-functioning, efficient, and is really able to absorb these technologies, is committed to using local products and to working with industry on really what is needed. And then all of this needs to be held together. It needs to be cohesive, integrated, coordinated, and we need to have optimal knowledge flows for this really to work successfully. So this is my view on how we're doing. I think we've got some things right, but we're still falling short in a lot of these areas. I think one of our strongest areas is really in the fundamental research base. We have a very strong and I think internationally recognized research base. We've got some globally recognized and world-leading researchers. And also some very sophisticated research equipment. The only problem is I don't think it's being optimally used at the moment. It's not being optimally shared between those who need it and across the whole value chain. And I also think we're falling short in some of the manufacturing infrastructure. In terms of product development value chain, we have some of the building blocks in place, in fact, probably most of them, but they're not functioning optimally. There are still some gaps and there's not really the seamless movement. And a lot of that is around information flows and just the knowledge of what is out there and what's available. And then on the supporting mechanisms, we do have some policies that are supportive, but unless they're properly fully implemented, they're going to fall short of what their original intention is. We have increasing amounts of funding coming into the sector across the different parts of the value chain. It's obviously never enough to get all the products through, but it certainly is improving. We also have skilled resources. I think where we are probably do have some gaps is this hybrid scientists and industrialists. So those who really understand how to take a product from the laboratory and into the market. And then I do think we're missing a lot in the market space. So we don't have enough uptake. We don't have enough. There's still a disconnect between those who are developing the products and those who are ultimately the end users. And I do think we're still lacking this cohesion and integration of the sector. So this is really, I think, some of the main rationale for setting up something like MeDDIC. So just to take you back to some of the history, the first seeds were sown back in 2016 when a working group was convened by a number of key stakeholders who wanted to build a strategy to develop the medical devices sector. So this meeting was held, as I say, in 2016. And at this meeting, the idea of a medical devices stakeholder forum was raised and established. It was decided that the Global Health Innovation Accelerator under MRC should perhaps act as the secretariat for this. And also at that meeting, a number of different working groups were established. So one of them, the Innovation Working Group, was tasked with going away and developing a concept note to form this medical device and diagnostics innovation cluster. And this is was an invitation from the Technology Innovation Agency, who have these TICP programs in different sectors and have identified the medical devices sector as ideal for setting up a cluster program. So this initiative was led by the CSIR, who put a lot of effort and time and coordination into getting a concept note and a feasibility study done with inputs from other stakeholders. This was presented to TIA, who then in 2019 made the decision that this should be hosted by the MRC under GEAR, and I'll talk a bit more about what GEAR is later. And then after that, we refined and further developed the business and operational plan, and it was finally approved by TIA in 2020. And the MeDDIC was launched in March 2021, so earlier this year, and perhaps some of you joined us for that launch. So the rationale, I think we all know, and it's probably been discussed at the conference, that our domestic device industry is dominated by imports. They say around 90% of the market value of the industry in South Africa is attributable to imports. Although we do have sizable exports as well, there remains this really excessive trade imbalance. And then last in particular, when COVID hit us, we realized it sort of brought home the risks of relying on imports and this need to be self-sustainable when it comes to rapidly developing and getting into the market urgently needed products, particularly in a pandemic situation. It's recognized by everyone, I believe, that the industry has enormous potential and capacity, but it is fragmented still, and I think most people agree is not functioning optimally. There are a number of constraints to the sector that have been identified over the years through industry consultations and various reports, and these include regulatory issues, lack of cohesion, lack of policies that support competitiveness, skills, skill shortages, etc. And so I think overall we recognize that if we could grow and really increase the competitiveness of the local medical device sector, we would improve health outcomes for Africa, we would facilitate skills development and transfer, and most importantly, we'd contribute to sustainable economic development. So why the MRC as a host? As I mentioned, there were a lot of organizations that were involved in putting together the proposal, and there are obviously a number of stakeholders who have an interest in seeing this get off the ground. The MRC, I believe, was chosen because we have a national footprint. So we're a science council established by an act of parliament. We're a Section 3A public entity, but we're an independent organization that has a national footprint. So we have offices in Durban, Cape Town, and Pretoria. Which also gives us this neutral convening power. So we're not linked to any particular academic institution or company or not-for-profit or association. So we have this ability to maintain neutrality. We also have an established leadership role in supporting health innovation in the country, extensive networks in academia, non-profits, and importantly in the funding sector. So we have this ability to leverage additional funding. Certainly over the last 8 to 10 years, we've more than doubled the amount of money coming into South Africa and being reallocated to health research and innovation. We have strong links to government entities, government departments, particularly the Department of Health and Science and Innovation. We also have a strong record in managing large grants and programs, and of course, by our very nature, the sound knowledge of the health needs and burden of disease in South Africa. So for those of you who are not familiar with the MRC, we have 4 core functions underpinned by obviously our admin support. So we conduct research in-house through intramural research units. We fund research externally through extramural research units and a number of grant mechanisms. We develop research capacity through specific grant awards for career development. And then we also facilitate innovation. And this is both through specific grant mechanisms, as well as hands-on support through our tech transfer office and the Global Health Innovation Accelerator. Just to, as an illustration, our total revenues last year were just over 1 billion rand. Around half of this comes from a baseline government grant, around 43% from contract income, and the rest from other income. Importantly, more than 80% of this is spent on research and innovation. Sorry about the interruption. So most of what we, the funding that comes in goes directly, as I mentioned, to research and innovation. So I head the Grants Innovation and Product Development Unit of the MRC. This is responsible for a large proportion of the grants that go out. So we manage most of the funding that comes to the MRC, but also innovation mechanisms. So that includes our technology transfer office, a collaborating Centre for Digital Health Innovation, and our Global Health Innovation Accelerator. And it's under this division and this department particularly where MeDDIC fits. So what is GEAR? I've mentioned GEAR a number of times. GEAR is the Global Health Innovation Accelerator. It's a partnership between the MRC and PATH. For those of you who aren't familiar with PATH, it's a product development partnership that was established more than 50 years ago, based in the US. And they have been doing product development for global health products for, as I said, the last 50 years or so, getting products all the way from ideation down into the market and scale up. So we have partnered with them to specifically work on technologies that are coming out of South Africa and elsewhere in Africa to get them through the market, through development and into the market and scaled up. And this is really the division or the program under which MeDDIC now fits, because the mandate and the activities of GEAR are very much aligned with the mandate and activities of MeDDIC. So GEAR has two main streams: the product development, which is specific projects, and then the sector development. So as I mentioned, MeDDIC now sits within here, and MeDDIC is really an opportunity for us as GEAR to expand our activities and to really have a bigger impact in the sector. So I'm going to spend the rest of the presentation talking about what MeDDIC is about, what we plan to do. This was presented very briefly earlier by Simon, but just to go into a little bit more detail, there are three main objectives of MeDDIC. The first is to create this integrated and cohesive ecosystem that supports and encourages development and growth of the medical devices sector. And through this, or to address this, we would like to look at things like policy and regulatory support, other mechanisms to strengthen the ecosystem, and also how we can bring in more funding into the sector. Our second main objective is localization and rapid product development. So looking at how we can, or what support we can provide to increase the amount of local products that are being developed and that are being taken up in the market, both locally and internationally. So we are looking at a development pipeline and a manufacturing pipeline with specific projects. We're looking at support to those projects, for example, regulatory support. And we're looking to see what technologies and capabilities are out there, which ones are missing, and how we can optimize their use to get products through this pipeline. And then finally, the third pillar is human capital development. And this is, again, supporting the development of skills that will, again, go all the way through the value chain, right from product development and down to industrialization. So the cluster program is really set up through a hub and spoke model. The MRC is the secretariat, the facilitator, the coordinator, and we sort of managing the program and overseeing the activities. But these three objectives will be implemented by those who are most suited to do it. So that's, you know, the people on this, attending this conference. It's SAPRA, it's SAMRC, it's MDMSA, it's the medical device companies, etc. So the interventions that we will facilitate, fund and coordinate will be implemented by partners out there. And we hope to be able to work with all of you to address these three key objectives. Just to put things in perspective as well, MeDDIC is not intended to replace any of the National System of Innovation role players. We're not here to replace what MDMSA is doing or SAMRC or anybody else. What we want to do is look at where the gaps are and bring sort of provide the glue that brings everyone together. So you want to bring the researchers together with the industry players, together with government and the end users, so that we can get the seamless value chain as well as a much better cohesion and coordination. Our programs and activities will be driven by the needs of the stakeholders, and the intention really of cluster programs is that if we have an integrated ecosystem, when we have this critical mass of stakeholders who all are working towards a common goal, we can collectively address the major hurdles and challenges in the industry, and we can also leverage critical mass to influence policy change. So we will deliver direct interventions to address some of these challenges, focusing on those that will have the broadest impact. Obviously, we can't be everything to everybody or fix every single problem. We will need to be selective and perhaps start small. But overall, we aim to increase the cohesion and cooperation between sector players. So this then just summarizes, and again, this was shown earlier by Simone, but I'll just go into a little bit more detail on exactly what the different components are. So I mentioned there are two main areas. There's the projects and the tech development, and then there's the broader sector development. So on the project side, we have already 7 active projects within GEAR. Those are global health technologies, and we'll continue to work on them with PATH. We've also recently funded 4 localization projects, and these are MeDDIC-specific projects. And these were selected through a call that we ran a couple of months ago, specifically aimed at developing products that could replace imports. We have already had our first meeting with most of these projects, and we're really excited about the potential and the impact that can come out of these projects. We also have 5 seed fund projects. So on the fundraising side, we actually have a national seed fund for medical devices and diagnostics, which is run by the MRC. We run calls at specific times that are determined by the Technology Innovation Agency. And one of our first calls resulted in 5 projects, which we are now closing out this month. But most of them are in the medical devices space. And then we also hope to actually bring in the public sector and look at how we can advance maybe some technologies coming out of frontline health workers into development and into the market. And then all of these projects, as well as those that fall outside this list, we recognize need hands-on support, both for tech development, regulatory, and getting into the market. So we have a regulatory support mechanism through a contract with the CSIR, where companies can go and get sort of ad hoc advice on how to get their products through all the way from the beginning. As you start developing the technology, what do you have to have in place in terms of documentation and planning for that ultimate registration of the product. In italics are those that we're still planning, so we're looking at possibly providing how we can facilitate product lifecycle management support, partner linkages, so how we can link those who are looking for partners or subcontractors in different areas to the relevant parties. Fundraising will be a large component of what we do. And we're really hoping to look at bigger engagement with the end user, the Department of Health, and really understanding how we can bring them in right from the beginning. And then on the medical device sector development side, we are designing specific platform interventions, which we will do together with the stakeholders. And those will be around capacity development, regulatory support, and others that are still to be determined. We are setting up a medical device innovation portal, and for this we're partnering with the CSIR's Innovation Bridge portal. This is a national portal which is already showcasing innovations coming out of South Africa, and it has quite a lot of other functionality as well. You may receive calls and challenges that are run through Innovation Bridge, and they will be setting up a dedicated medical device section within that portal. We will be reviving the Medical Device Stakeholder Forum, which hasn't met for some time. The first one being next month, when we release the results of a landscape analysis that we've been conducting. And then also from the Medical Device Stakeholder Forum, we would like to establish a policy working group and then see how we can support the existing regulatory working groups without reinventing the wheel. So just finally, this is my last slide, just to summarize the activities which we already have in progress. I mentioned the contract with the CSIR to provide regulatory support and the localization projects. We have been conducting this landscape analysis for some time now, and I do extend sincere apologies to those who've been waiting with bated breath for the results. We've literally been delayed for over a year now with COVID and being completely reallocated, or having to reallocate all our resources to COVID. But the good news is the report is in its final stages, and we will be presenting that to the stakeholders in mid-November. So please look out for that invitation. Stemming from this, we will be holding workshops. I think at that actual launch event where we download the results of the survey, we would like to actually set up working groups. So, you know, we'll look at the main outcomes, where the main gaps are, and hope to establish working groups to start working on and designing interventions to address these. Stemming from this survey also is the portal, which I've mentioned. The stakeholder forum I mentioned, so the first meeting will be in November, but we do hope to hold these regularly. So one of the things we'll be doing in the planning on the right-hand block is actually setting out a roster of meetings and workshops for the forum on particular topics. We're in discussions with SAMRC on how we can provide support to them as they roll out a call-up for registration of medical devices. That support may take the form of assisting with the database of products that will need to be called up, but we also talk to them about an online system to obviously increase the efficiencies and digitize this whole process. And then finally, we're in discussions with the Gauteng Department of Economic Development, who are very interested in supporting the medical device sector, specifically in Gauteng, and possibly putting some money through the TICP, through MeDDIC, to be able to support these companies. And we're having similar discussions in other provinces as well. And then moving forward, as I mentioned, we'll design new interventions based on the results of the survey. Fundraising is going to be a large component of what we do. We want to bring as much money into the sector as possible. That'll be project specific, so it'll be to drive new projects through to localization, for localization through to the market, but also for specific interventions that we might identify. I mentioned the stakeholder forum. We would like to work with Treasury and Department of Health around what are the major procurement contracts and how we can we increase local content for these. We'd like to really engage with the Department of Health and design mechanisms for them to be more involved in designing what the products are that are needed out there and getting them all the way through, getting that user input right throughout, and obviously ensuring that there is uptake by the department once the products are ready. And then finally, we are discussing with some of the universities and MeDDIC and others how we can support capacity development initiatives that are already in progress and fill the gaps for the skills needs that are not yet addressed. So where we might need to commission the development of new courses. So that in a nutshell is where we are. We about 8 months old now, and we have just in fact hired a new program manager who will be taking on the management of MeDDIC, and we will introduce her at the stakeholder forum in November. And I think what I'd like to leave you with is just an invitation to all stakeholders to get involved in our activities. You will see from, in fact, from the previous slide, I forgot to mention, but Simone had mentioned it, the MeDDIC Steering Committee really comprises representatives from the main stakeholders. So this is the opportunity for stakeholders to determine what the strategy is for MeDDIC, what we invest in, what activities we support, and what interventions we drive. So please do use your representatives to get your voice heard. And thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mulder, for that very informative presentation. Sorry, there I go. Thank you. Any questions? I see there's not too many questions at the moment on the chat. I have a question in regards to innovation and the discipline of ISO 13485. I often see that there's a disconnect between the research processes and the discipline that we require for regulatory approval and for the regulatory approval phase. How would MeDDIC be handling this?
So can you just rephrase, re-ask the question? I'm not quite sure what you're asking.
Okay, I mean, obviously I'm fortunate at being also having a consultancy, is that I see a lot of research projects going on. And then when the time comes to actually now populate the technical documentation and use the discipline of writing things down and planning, there's often a disconnect between what's happening at the research level and what is required for the discipline of design control when it comes to medical products.
Sorry, yes. So I understand what you're asking, and we've seen exactly the same disconnect. So, you know, if you look at the origins of new medical devices at universities, they're coming from academic departments doing research. They're not, half of them are not even familiar with ISO 13485, with the requirement to document your development as you go along, to have a full history of the development, you know, to make sure it's done under the correct conditions, to have all the specifications in place, etc. So with the result is that once they get to the point of having to register products or to get them into the market, they have to go back and get all of that in place. So there is a drive, you know, through courses like those offered by UCT, Stellenbosch and others, for those specifically in the biomedical engineering space, to have this familiarity from the beginning and to be able to document things as they go along, to understand what ISO 13485 is about, to get the technical documents in place, etc. But I don't think that's going to be enough, because the innovations are stemming from departments that don't benefit from that, innovators who have not been through that kind of training. And that's where I think the support from CSIR and others becomes vital. And one of the debates we were actually having with CSIR is how early should they allow companies or innovators to come onto their system or to their support mechanism. And the argument is get them on as early as possible, because then they realize from the beginning they need to be documenting this. But you know, I think it's really through doing, as innovators go through the system, they'll realize. But I do think it's something that can be addressed afterwards. You know, most of the devices that I know of that have been developed have not been developed under those conditions with all the documentation in place, and it's gone, you know, it's been done after the fact, and it is possible. But your point is very well taken, and I do think we need to change that culture and way of doing product development.
Thank you, thank you. And it actually brings to one of the first questions from Caroline. She says, thank you, Dr. Mulder, very insightful presentation. Who can make use of the regulatory support through the CSR, and what is the process? And I had that very same question. Where do we go? How do we get there?
Okay, so there is a link on our website. The last page of my presentation has the website for MeDDIC. There is a link on there to the CSR platform. They have set up a let's call it an onboarding questionnaire. So you can go in there, fill in some of the details, and then they will then engage with the company or the innovator to get more information as necessary and to determine what their need is. And then they get either officially onboarded and sort of taken through the assistance process. So what's happened, there's about 17 companies so far that have either approached them or in the system or already been helped. With some of them, it's literally a quick question on who can I go to get my product validated or to do a quick clinical study. CSR has helped them, given them some contacts, and they've said thank you and moved on. Others have come in to really understand what it's about, but realized that they're not quite there yet and sort of are reserving for later. And there are others that are really in the system now and are being taken through. So they're being given the templates that are needed. They're being given advice on what sort of class, what technical documents need to be in place, etc. And also just to mention, this is not to replace regulatory consultants and specialists. This is to guide through the process. So some of the money that has gone to CSR actually gets used to subcontract regulatory consultants in on particular projects where that's required. So it's a sort of all-inclusive service. And a lot of these will actually lead to new contracts for regulatory consultants as you know, bigger pieces of work need to be done, and the clients get on referred to who can help them. So if you go to the website, there is a link there. The CSR takes it from there. So as soon as you've made the link with them, they will check if they've got enough information, and then they will walk you through the system. What we do ask is that when you graduate from the system, that you fill in the exit questionnaire, because it's very important for us in reporting to our funders that this program has had an impact, you know, what support was provided, and what kind of impact it's going to have ultimately on the company, the innovator, and the product.
Awesome, thank you. And of course, the big question is, does it cost the applicant any money?
No,
awesome. Well,
so sorry, just to mention, the only cost that will come in is if there's additional support. So if the company comes in and realizes, actually, I need a whole big dossier written, they're going to have to go and you know, hire a regulatory consultant to do that huge piece of work. So there's a limit to what the CSR can provide. Also, if they need specific tech dev support, so if they need a prototype made, that's not covered. What's covered is advice.
Okay. So like no verification, testing, or validation, that still becomes part of your own cost. Yeah. And obviously there will be these different funding structures that we're all looking at for that anyway. Excellent. So then we've got a question from Gladness. When is the next call for localization project funding in 2022?
So that I can't answer right now. As I say, we're continually raising funding. We will have another seed fund call coming out, but that will be dependent on tier. We have actually a different arrangement with tier for our seed fund, in that it's a co-funded one. So it's not just tier funding. The MRC is contributing funding as well. So we will work with tier on timelines for releasing the next call based on funding available in the next financial year. But there will almost certainly be a call, probably Q1 or Q2 in 2022.
Okay, thank you for that. I have a question in regards to the CSIR Innovation Bridge portal. is that for anyone to see and follow, or is it on their website?
Yes, I was just I can't remember if we've got the link on our website. I don't think we have it as yet. But if you search for Innovation Bridge, you can go onto the portal. You can register as an institution or as a company. You can load your technologies and you can search through. So you can search through what technologies are there, what the opportunities are. They are all structured according to institution and technology type and sector. So it's worth just going onto the portal and sort of browsing through it. So one of the things we did last year with COVID was we worked with Innovation Bridge and the CSIR Morocco Institute to establish specifically a COVID repository there, where we were looking to load specifically COVID projects. It isn't as comprehensive as we'd hoped. We'd like to add more projects and really make better use of that. So we've got a repository of the COVID research and innovation happening in the country. But that's just one of the additional add-ons that they did for us around COVID.
Thank you for that. I think we'll take the last question, which is from Tanya. She says, thank you, Michelle, great work MeDDIC is doing. Can you share how the medtech sector can potentially support commercialization of some of these innovations? It's a good question.
Sure. So, you know, I think there's a lot of R&D happening, or maybe a lot is a bit of a strong word, but there is definitely some innovation happening within the companies themselves. But honestly, most of the innovation is happening at the universities. And I think we all know that these universities are equipped to get to a certain point in product development, and that's when the commercial partners have to come on board. And the earlier they come on board, the better, because otherwise you know, they're having to redesign parts of the product. They need to be involved fairly early on to shape what that final product looks like, and back to your earlier point, making sure that it's all properly documented throughout the development process. So to me, the key factor here, or the key role for industry and the medtech sector, is being able to absorb these technologies, being willing to work with the universities to take these on as new products, knowing that there is going to be a bit of investment required, there's going to be some development still that needs to happen, but utilizing the skills that are there at the university in the product development space, the prototyping, even testing, clinical testing and validation. So without the medtech sector, these products are not going to get to market. So it has a very key role to play. We just honestly, as a tech transfer office at an academic institution, do struggle to find local partners who are willing to take up new medical devices. And I think if there were more who were willing to do this, we would see more innovations coming through.
100% agree. Well, thank you very much for the informative feedback that you've given us. I think it's given people a lot of insight as to what's going on and where to go. So thank you very much for your time and presenting today. So if there are no further questions, we ask our attendees to take a moment to complete the session poll. While they do that, again, I'd like to thank Dr. Mulder. We appreciate everything. We appreciate your time. And we obviously are looking forward to future engagement and our next medical device forum. Very excited about that. Thank you once again.
And thank you to the organizers.